So we're going to do our best to keep this at 30 minutes, where we want to make sure that there's time for people to ask questions. And so Katherine is going to teach us about gut health. Hey, Jamaica. Hey. Okay, so Katherine is just a dear friend of mine, and I'm so glad she's in Alabama now with me. Katherine has been pursuing her own, basically just pursuing her own education with holistic wellness. And we were just talking about how it started about 10 years ago or so. And so would you say that, what would you say was your catalyst into wanting to have a better understanding of holistic wellness?
It was actually Aaron, my husband, who showed me a couple of documentaries when I had a newborn and we were up late, and we watched these eye-opening documentaries that blew my mind. I was like, I had no idea, and that just spurred into more research and education, and it's been going ever since. The recent is gut health. That's my jam right now.
Yep. So gut health. And I'll just say, can you guys hear her okay and me okay? There isn't any other background noise that's interfering.
All right. Thank you.
If it gets hard to hear, just like holler at us. I know just because experience, we're walking life together as mamas. And so Katherine not only started her wellness journey in educating herself 10 years ago, but she has continued to pursue a better understanding all the time of it. And I wanted her to talk to us tonight about gut health because that's what she's particularly knowledgeable and passionate about. And I believe that our best teachers are not just teachers that are knowledgeable, but that are passionate. So in addition to Katherine pursuing a better understanding of gut health and holistic wellness, she is also working on the local level in her kids' school to promote health education or nutrition. Well, you explained in a little blurb what you're doing with them.
Just got a nutrition committee started just a couple of weeks ago, so I'm really excited about that. Also getting our outdoor classroom revitalized, and want to get those kids outdoors and in the dirt so they can support their microbiome, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. I'm just really passionate about teaching our kids because I didn't know any of this stuff growing up, and you know, I think the information's out there now, so we should teach our kids because it's really important.
Yep, and they are our future.
So that's what I'm doing. I'm in the schools trying to get that stuff in the classroom.
Awesome. Okay, so let's just jump right in. Let's do it. I know that we've talked about this, but I might be like a lot of you guys. Maybe you are more knowledgeable than me. I don't know a whole lot about gut health. So what is gut health and why do we care about it?
Yeah, so let me define the gut microbiome first. I'll maybe use the word gut or microbiome or microbiota interchangeably. It's basically referring to all of the organisms that live in our body and on our body. So that's on your skin, in your mouth, in your nose, in your ears, in your intestines, in your bladder, all of that. And there are more than 100 trillion microscopic species in the entire human body. In fact, your body has 100 times more bacterial DNA than your own DNA. So you are literally only 1% human.
Whoa.
We are made from bacteria and microbes. Wow. And it's not just bacteria, bad bacteria, good bacteria. It's different microbes, and there's parasites and viruses and things that your immune system is fighting all the time and doing its job. You just don't know what's going on. So yes, the way to look at your body and your health is really that you are an ecosystem, just like a garden in your yard, that you have to treat it as such. And I think that's just a whole nother way of thinking about health. It's just a way different mindset.
That really redefines almost like gardening with kids.
Yeah.
In my head, like I love to garden, and I think that's such a great teaching tool if we could help make that connection between what we experience at a gardening level.
Yeah.
And how that connects to our body.
Absolutely.
I love that.
So I wrote down a bunch of notes about what your microbiome does, and so this is not all inclusive, but here's a few things. It produces bacteria that all have enzymes and different functions. Every single microbe in your in your gut or microbiome has its own DNA and its own purpose. So there's a lot going on in there. It's involved in making micronutrients. It's involved with synthesizing and making hormones active. It's involved with detoxifying. So I've read that some people consider it your second liver. A lot of times when your gut is working so hard in getting rid of all the toxins that we're putting in our body and that we're exposed to, it makes your liver work a lot harder. So they work together. It regulates our immune system, and that's the big one that I'll go into a little bit further. That's what I'm really interested in. And the way everybody's gut bacteria is different. So your gut profile looks completely different from mine. And it really plays a large role in how your body looks at food, the way it processes food, metabolizes food, how it's absorbed and delivered to all of your cells to provide the energy that you need. It also produces and releases important chemicals and neurotransmitters to your brain through the vagus nerve. So one of the huge pieces of research now, and this is all like the last 10, 15 years, by the way. So basically the Human Genome Project started in 2008. And so that's only 11 years ago, where all of this stuff is being researched now. It's a huge hot topic, and I'm glad it is. But one of my resources, I'll just put this book up here, is Brain Maker by David Perlmutter, MD, and it's the power of gut microbes to heal and protect your brain for life. So he talks all about the gut-brain connection. That's a big topic right now, and it's so important. The way that you feel physically and mentally and emotionally is largely impacted by how healthy your gut is.
That's crazy.
So this is a great book. I haven't read the whole thing yet, but I'm starting to skim through it, and I used it a little bit for this chat. So they're finding the connection between the nerves in your gut and the vagus nerve, your central nervous system, and the way that the microbes themselves have their own language and communicate to your brain. And they call it the second brain. And one of your largest organs. You think of your heart and your lungs and your stomach as organs, but nobody thinks about the gut as an actual organ. So another thing about the gut-brain connection too is that I think it's 80%, 70 or 80%, or maybe 90%, it's up there, of serotonin, which is the feel-good hormone, is produced in your gut.
Interesting.
So if you don't have the right diversity, if you don't have all of the guys and gals in there doing what they need to do, you may not be producing enough serotonin.
And so that could be linked to maybe depression?
Absolutely.
All that, yeah.
Absolutely. So, before, going on meds to produce the serotonin, ask, why is my gut not producing that serotonin? What can I do to make it naturally? It's all produced in your gut.
The serotonin is produced in the gut.
Correct.
So just asking more questions when you get to that juncture, maybe, if I'm not feeling good, seeing someone that, okay, interesting. I like that.
Yeah. Emotional health, think gut. So why do we want to learn about this? Why is this so important? I was thinking about that as I was preparing for this. And I think the main reason is, well, what I just said is that everything about our health, it hinges on the state of our microbiome. But also on the flip side, that an unhealthy microbiome is linked to obesity, chronic disease, as well as basically all symptoms associated with an overactive immune system or chronic inflammation. So those are things that you may have heard of.
What do you mean by overactive immune system?
We'll get into that.
Okay.
Overactive immune system is basically when we'll talk about leaky gut. We'll talk about what that means. And basically it's when your immune system is seeing things that it shouldn't see. because there's permeability in your gut lining. And I'll just go into it right now. There's 70% of your immune system is in your gut. And there's a barrier, like a friendly fence between your immune system cells and the microbes that digest your food. This fence is how they communicate. It's how they talk. And when you are digesting food and absorbing toxins from the environment or the food or the household cleaners that you're using, that's all taken care of by these guys over here, because they're protecting you.
Right.
And so your immune system's job is to attack foreign threats, right? Yeah. To keep you well. So when there's permeability, and we'll go into that in just a second, of what causes that, but when there's permeability, there are things, the microbes themselves, or large particles of food, or toxins, chemicals that leak through. And so your immune system goes on overdrive. It's like, what the heck is this?
I see.
And when you are eating 3 times a day and you are living life, this is a chronic, all the time, every minute thing. When your immune system goes on active overdrive, it causes inflammation. Just like pain, or when you're sick, you are inflamed. When you are well, then it goes down. When it doesn't ever stop, that's the root of disease. Gotcha. Everything
is just always on like overdrive.
Yes.
Working too hard.
And pretty much every chronic disease or itis or cancer or Alzheimer's, brain, all the autoimmune diseases, brain diseases are linked to inflammatory responses. Right. It's all inflammatory diseases.
Okay.
So
one of the causes of the inflammatory response is when the body's so burdened, and so what causes that leaky?
Yeah. So before I get into what causes the leaky, let's give some examples of autoimmune and give some examples of some of the things that we know people are suffering from, or know someone who's suffering from it. So autoimmune disease, these are things like lupus, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, celiac disease, MS, Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Other examples are ADHD, asthma, allergies, chronic fatigue, mood disorders, including depression and anxiety, diabetes, memory problems, Alzheimer's, frequent colds or infections even, intestinal disorders like SIBO and IBS, those types of things, insomnia, joint inflammation, high blood pressure, heart disease, skin problems like acne, extreme menstrual symptoms or menopausal symptoms, cancer, anything itis. These are all issues that are linked to your gut microbiome.
So are they linked to the gut microbiome not being diverse enough, or is it because of that permeability thing, or are those the same thing?
Good question. It's on my next page. Yeah, you're amazing.
I'm such a good listener.
So now you know that all of these things, if you're wondering like myself, I feel like I'm tired all the time. I have some major PMS symptoms. What's wrong with me? I just don't feel good. I'm tired all the time. I don't have that energy. And I don't have like a major symptom, but I just don't feel good. So maybe it's my gut. Well, what's wrong with my gut? How did it get there? So there's a couple things that I've learned. One of them is the low diversity that you're mentioning, or dysbiosis. So you have more bad bacteria than good bacteria. So you'll hear that word sometimes, like out of balance. Out of balance. And you want more of the good guys than the bad guys. So if you don't have enough, a lot of that is due from you not feeding your gut properly. So I read that 75% of the Western diet is of little of no value to the gut. It's digested in the upper digestive tract. It's mostly refined carbs that just spike your blood sugar, and it doesn't actually go down into your gut, and doesn't carry the vitamins and micronutrients and the fiber's big word,
big one,
that your your microbes need to eat. So they need to eat.
And is that also a result of soil sterilization? So
Yeah.
does that also
Yeah.
play a role where it's like our vegetables are basically just sterile?
Yes. So if you look ancestral back in the day, yes, we do not have the diversity in our gut microbiomes that we used to have hundreds of years ago. And when you compare our gut microbiome to communities in other countries that are more, that are not as modernized, you'll see completely different microbiome, and theirs is a lot more diverse.
Right.
So with our diet, we do not feed our microbes. And so they cannot flourish, they cannot reproduce. So that's one thing, and we'll kind of talk about how you can do that in just a second. And then the other is this permeability situation, or leaky gut, which a lot of people have heard of. I wrote down dysbiosis. Yeah, I think I got it. I got it all. Oh, another thing about this was interesting that I read in this book was when you don't have enough of those good guys. I said all bacteria have specific jobs. When you don't have enough of them, you may not have all the good guys that protect you against cancer, right? Or do these specific things. So disease and cancer are on the rise because we don't have anything to fight it off. The good guys down there to help us out. Anyway, so so the integrity of the gut lining, as I talked about, can become compromised if it's constantly being exposed to irritants through our diet and through our environment. So food obviously is the number one because that's what goes in our body, but we also absorb chemicals through our household products, through our cosmetics, our personal care, cleaning, the air we breathe, the water we drink. So if our lining is constantly being bombarded to things that are damaging to it, it becomes permeable, weakened. Another thing is, and I have it on my next page here, is medications. Medications also. I learned that ibuprofen and all the anti-inflammatory drugs are damaging to the gut lining. I take less than I used to, but I mean, that was like a no-brainer. If you had a headache, you just take it.
Or I feel like when we had kids like 10 years ago, it was just like, oh, they're hurting from teething, give them Tylenol, give them ibuprofen.
Right. So those are linked to being damaging to and causing tears in your lining. And the thing is that your body heals itself. So if you take ibuprofen or whatever and it tears a little bit, it heals. And then you do something else, it tears, it heals. You do something else, it tears, it heals. But over time, and there can be a trigger. It could be a major stress in your life. It could be a surgery. It could be, something like that to trigger that it just doesn't heal anymore. Right. And then you've got those gaps. And that's when you've got this leaky gut, toxins and large particles of food getting into your bloodstream where it does not belong. Right. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So so some of the risk factors, briefly, things that I try to think about or ask people when they're contemplating whether or not their gut could be a problem or they need to address it. And I encourage people to research this further too, and learn more about it because it's fascinating. One is mode of delivery. So whether you were born vaginally or from a C-section. So if a baby is born by C-section, they do not get the secretions from the vaginal canal, which has all those
prolific.
So I forgot to mention, when you have it on your skin, it's also
in your vaginal canal and everything.
It's everywhere. Yes. And so the babies don't get that. And so what they're doing now, thankfully, is they're starting to swab babies by C-section so that they get those gut bacteria to help them colonize. Because when babies are born, their gut microbiome is practically sterile. There's nothing there. So they're going to get it from the mode of delivery. They're going to get it from breast milk. So diet during infancy is a big one.
So these are things that people might think about as in an adult life, like, oh, I was born C-section.
Maybe
my mom didn't investigate this history, this personal medical history.
Yeah, ask yourself, or if your kids are having issues, right? So if your kids are having allergies or asthma, or they're sick all the time, they have chronic ear infections,
right?
Is asking yourself, is that a problem,
right?
Or something that I should think about. So your diet during adulthood, huge. That's the number one, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But that could be a whole nother lesson, which I'm happy to do.
So probably basically like whole food best versus processed stuff.
Absolutely. Antibiotics. So another question about like when you were younger. So I had chronic ear infections, and I believe I was on antibiotics quite a bit. And back then, you go to the doctor and you get antibiotics, and you got the pink stuff that tastes good, and you wanted antibiotics. Right. So you just did them all the time.
I remember wanting that too.
And even as an adult, when my kids were small, I would feel my throat, and I'd be like, oh, I have strep throat. I need antibiotics. Yeah. And I would just call and literally try to avoid going into the office. I would call and say, will you please send me antibiotics, because I want to feel better fast.
Right. That's just what we were taught then.
But antibiotics are like a atomic bomb for your gut. Okay, because they, especially the broad spectrum antibiotics that they use in hospitals and so forth, they kill the bad guys, which is great, and they're life-saving, and I've been on them, and they saved my life. Yeah. So in the hospital, and life-saving, absolutely necessary, but they also kill the good guys. And the good news is that within a month or two, you can repopulate your microbiome. So it's not like the end of the world. But if you were on antibiotics a lot as a child,
it's going to take longer than just a month.
Then that might be something to think about as far as your gut health. I also read an interesting fact too, that if you are on antibiotics, just one round of it, you have a 25% increase of having depression over the next 12 months.
Interesting.
And that increases, as you take more antibiotics.
Right.
That risk grows.
Interesting.
Just because you're depleting all of it. And if you're not trying to recoup it all, then that could get worse and worse and worse, and could be a trigger, could cause an autoimmune disease.
Which that makes sense because of what you said about the serotonin. It's just annihilating all of that production.
Yeah. Another thing too is when you don't have enough of those, I forgot this as well, is when you don't have enough of the good guys, when you're not feeding it dietary fiber. Dietary fiber is a big deal. There's a woman called Erica Sonnenberg. She wrote a book about it, and you can find her on YouTube. She is like all about dietary fiber, and it's really, really interesting. When you don't have enough of that and your microbes are starving, just basically kind of us in the Western world is we're starving our microbiome by not taking care of it.
Right.
They actually, because they can't, they're hungry, they actually start eating the cells of your lining.
Oh, geez.
So not only do the chemicals and toxins deteriorate that wall, but also your own microbes that are starving will start to eat it.
Wow. Crazy.
Yeah.
And that could be fixed by eating enough dietary fiber.
Right.
Got it.
Right. So yeah.
Dietary fiber, you mean like in whole foods, not like a supplement?
You can take them in supplements too.
Okay.
In fact, many people do a combination of both.
Got it.
So you'll notice, like, in Young Living's supplement, you have pro and prebiotic. Yes. And I'll mention that in a minute. Like, the prebiotic is the dietary fiber.
Got it.
Those are the same
fertilizer of it.
Yeah. They're the same thing. Prebiotics is the dietary fiber. It's like chicory root, inulin.
Got it.
And then real, like, whole food, you can get it: onions, garlic, asparagus.
Got it.
A couple other things I'll think about in a second. But they are what feed your microbes. Another thing to think about is genetics, and you can't leave that out.
No.
So I'll just say that. Stress, another big one, is
going through stress can deplete the microbiome.
Stress or trauma, because when you're stressed, and most people are chronically stressed, your body, whether it's good stress or bad stress. So my excitement for this call, and I, my heart goes, is stress. My body doesn't know the difference between that or if, I was scared of the lightning that was happening an hour ago outside.
Totally.
So my body can't tell the difference. But that causes your body to be in fight or flight response. And if it's chronically in that mode, you're not in your rest and digest mode, right? So you can't be in both at the same time. So you're either in fight or flight or rest and digest, and your microbiome in your gut needs you to be in rest and digest so that it can do its thing. And being in fight or flight all the time, whether it's good stress or bad stress or your perception of stress, that will hurt your microbiome and your immune system. And with trauma, and this is what happened with me, and I won't go into much detail, but that was the trigger for me. It was chronic stress for about 2 years and a trauma. And then I started to not feel well. And that's what
pretty
really
fast.
Yeah.
That just was like the straw that broke the camel's back.
Exactly. And that's when I got a little bit concerned about autoimmune disease. Because for me it was
on the verge of that.
Absolutely. And for me it was thyroid. So I was like, and I got some blood work done and my thyroid TSH is elevated, and I just got kind of nervous about it because I thought, okay, if I don't do something now and learn about this, I could very well go full into an autoimmune condition.
So I might be jumping ahead here, but this feels like a lot to think about.
Yeah.
And so how, like I first think of my kids, like, okay, how do I, because thankfully, not all of that applies to them, but like, especially with a son that has constant fight or flight. Yeah. So how do you begin to tackle and restore and make better choices for their gut health for their future? Because I want to start now so that I set them up well in their young adult life.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's quite simple, but it's easier said than done sometimes. But really the basics of it are really simple. What you can do right now, you are on point, Lisa. This is right where I was going.
Or your notes are just so good in your flow.
What are some things we can do or study more about?
Right.
So number one is we can avoid the harmful stuff, the microbiome killers. Okay, we talked about that just a little bit. We can choose different household products, cosmetics, personal care. Okay, so we want to go as natural as possible, and that's Lisa's expertise. Right.
So Young Living's expertise.
Young Living's expertise
we're the vessel
of buying products that are way more natural, DIY, whatever. But getting those things that you don't know how to pronounce or don't know what that is, don't use it. Okay.
Which is unfortunately like 90% of what's quickly available to us.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of options now. I think it's just making those choices, and also just doing one thing at a time. Not trying to redo everything and get yourself overwhelmed, but maybe just choose a different toothpaste, or maybe just choose a different glass cleaner. I mean, just one thing at a time. GMO foods, stay away from them. They are very damaging. They are basically grown from depleted soil that's pumped with chemicals. They're also made to be resistant to Roundup, and Roundup has been in the news lately. I hope everybody's been reading about that, linked to cancer. It's not good. It's not sustainable, and it's not good.
I'm going to pause for a second because I want to make this connection that you made earlier about the garden. And when I was at the Gold Retreat and I was at the Young Living Farm, they did a talk on naturally sustainable farming, which is what Young Living uses in all their farms. And I thought it was fascinating how he was talking about this microbiome of the soil And I was like, wait a second, this sounds awfully familiar to the same workshops I go to that's talking about this microbiome of our gut. And he proceeded to talk about how conventionally now we're pumping in all these pesticides and harsh fertilizers that are killing off that microbiome, which is just all the fun little bugs that Luke loves in all the soil. But that does connect then. That same microbiome in the soil feeds the plant, which we eat, which feeds our microbiome.
Absolutely.
So there is that symbiotic relationship that if that's sterilizing, then we're being sterilized.
So you want to eat the best food as you possibly can. You want to go organic. You want to get farm-raised meats. You don't want, or avoid farm-raised meats, sorry. Opposite. You want pasture-raised meats, organic meats, because these farm-raised are filled with hormones, antibiotics. I forgot to mention too, with the antibiotic thing, antibiotics is in our water. It's in the soil. So we want to stay away from animals that take them
to that, right?
Processed and refined carbs, kind of touched on that before. They don't reach your digestive tract in the way it's supposed to, and they cause all sorts of other problems that I don't have time to go into. So your water and your air, I mentioned that. So research filters, research different filters for your water. I use a Berkey. It cost me like $150. We've had it for like a year. That works great.
Right.
Takes a lot of the chlorine out. So when you're in a chlorinated pool, when you are drinking chlorinated water, when you are watering your plants with chlorinated water from your home water source, that kills bacteria.
Right.
So think about your water, think about your air. Use glass, don't use plastic for your water bottles as they leak.
Small, simple things.
Small, simple things. So experiment with food. This, again, could be a whole nother topic. So briefly, eating clean, as clean as you can. Eat real food. Try some sort of elimination diet. Research that. I think it's helpful for everyone to do something like that in their lifetime, to learn something about yourself, learn something about your body.
And by elimination diet, like taking out dairy or taking out like gluten. Okay.
So with thyroid issues,
yes,
for thyroid issues, time and time again, what I read from doctors is the number one thing, and even actually this guy, the spring maker guy, when he sees somebody with dementia or ADHD or any brain issue, the very first thing he does is take them off gluten. And I won't go into that in much detail, but try it. So I've tried it, and I'm not perfect yet, but it's like these baby steps. But,
sure.
Do it for a month or 3 months. Give it some time. And none of these things you'll notice, like we said, you've got 100 trillion microbes in your body, but you don't feel them. You have no idea, right? So you take gluten out for a week, and unless you have like IBS, you're not going to notice anything, right? So you got to give it some time. So add prebiotic foods. That's the dietary fiber. So we talked about that a little bit. You can also take supplements for that.
And I bet you could go on Google and say, like, what are prebiotic foods?
Totally.
And like find a good list.
Totally. And so some I mentioned were onions, garlic, ginger. I also have written here bananas, flaxseed, seaweed. So there's asparagus.
Okay.
And then decrease inflammatory foods. And you can Google that too, but that's your gluten and your dairy. Sometimes it's corn, soy.
Right.
Just try something. Because I feel you will learn something about yourself doing some type of elimination diet. The Mediterranean diet, there's another Dr. Andrew Weil, W-E-I-L, who I greatly admire. He's just brilliant, and he does a lot. He's written a lot of books, and the Mediterranean diet is kind of his thing. And that's a very low inflammation-based diet, which is the link to anti-aging and anti-disease. It's those communities in Greece and other places around the world that
fats and they're whole food and lots of vegetables.
Real food, lots of fiber with their vegetables, whole grains. That also whole grains is dietary fiber. That they're age less and have less disease. And so he's an expert at that. I've added fish oil to my supplements. I don't take many, but fish oil is high in omega-3s. It's very anti-inflammatory. So
gotcha.
That you may want to just try that. Maybe try taking a fish oil supplement every morning and every night and see if you see a difference. Probiotic foods. So that's the microbes themselves. That's the live cultures. Those are the things that you actually want to put in there and want them to take residence and grow and flourish. And so that's your foods like yogurt or kefir, kimchi, sauerkraut, any pickled vegetables, kombucha tea, sourdough, miso soup. Miso soup is like major superfood. Anything that fermented in live cultures, adding those. And I would recommend adding those slowly because if you do in fact have a dysbiosis or there is a challenge in your gut, those in a large quantity may kind of backfire on you. For example, I'm just saying that from experience. If I drink kombucha every day, I will have a lot of stomach pain. I will not be a happy camper. I have to take it kind of slow. And that's a clue to me, in my opinion, is that
you're restoring it. It needs work still.
Yeah, I need some work to do still. So add probiotic foods, prebiotic foods, eat clean, experiment with food, figure out what works for you. And then sleep, rest, recover, and manage your stress. That's a big one. Like we mentioned before, you want your body in that rest and digest state as much as possible. So whether that's focusing on your breath work, using essential oils to help you relax, to sleep better, anything that you can do to slow down, be mindful.
I love that.
That is all good for your body. And then I think one of the biggest ones, the two biggest ones are the food, the prebiotic, and getting outside. So I loved what you said about the garden, because that is what is a huge problem that we're facing. Our kids are not outside enough. We are over sanitizing everything. So when you YouTube this Erica Sonnenberg that I was mentioning, she talks about how they make all these probiotic foods, because you can DIY a lot of these things, by the way. You can pickle your own stuff and make your own kombucha, and you can make your own kimchi. But she also, like, if her kids go outside and play in the dirt and in the mud, she doesn't necessarily have them wash their hands before they eat. Whereas that's just something that you just want to do. You want to just wash your hands all the time. So I'm encouraging my kids to not wash their hands before they eat all the time.
Please rub off on Luke. Have you been around enough to see him? He's like paranoid about washing his hands.
Or like pick something up off the floor. Like there's another doctor, Dr. Mark Hyman, who I greatly admire too. He said something that I read that he gets excited. It's like me getting excited about the gut microbiome, but he gets excited when food falls on the floor. And he picks it up and he eats it, and he's like, "This is good. I'm getting microbes too." Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's so nerdy, but that's what I love. But anyway, it's getting outside. So we're not outside enough. We don't get out in nature. You're outside in nature, whether you're just walking outside or you're digging in the soil of your garden or playing with your kids outside. You are absorbing microbes. All that good stuff you are putting on your body. And so we live in air-conditioned 4 walls all day, and then we drive in our 4-wall car, little air-conditioned place, and we go from place to place, and we don't breathe the air. We don't, if you put your feet in the stream, I mean, all of these things that can connect you to nature, is so important and so undervalued. So if I were to stress 2 things, would be get outside, get in nature, relax and have fun in nature, and eat good food. But also use good products. Use good products. And so
reduce the exposure to the
stuff. And so I'll end with this other reference. So this was a documentary series that I loved. It's called Interconnected. It's by Dr. Pedram Shojai, Shojai. And he compiled 70 different experts in the field of functional medicine and the microbiome, really. And I got this awesome companion guide with all the transcripts from this like 9-part series. And so I took a lot of the information from this as well. But in here, they do recommendations for natural home remedies and natural antibiotics. And so to just talk about essential oils for a second, they talked about lemon, they talked about eucalyptus, they talked about lavender, they talked about clove, peppermint, oregano, frankincense, tea tree. So everything that, you know, a lot of them in the starter kit.
Right.
All of those are natural remedies that you can use not only for illnesses, colds and flus and so forth, but also for your cleaning products.
Right.
That you can do DIY
Cleaning the air in your house, so to say, and
you can diffuse, all of that stuff. So those were my resources, plus my modules in my integrative nutrition course. Right. So I kind of compiled all that together, and
yeah,
there you have it.
I loved it.
Yeah.
It probably felt like 10 minutes to you.
I hope that was
go over, but it's okay.
Okay. I
mean, I think that people, if you need to get off, feel free to get off, but I really want to make sure that there's time for you guys to ask the questions that you have. I was able to ask questions all along, but I do have you guys muted, and we have Katherine held captive. So kind of.
I'm not going
anywhere.
Yeah.
We'll probably stay and talk all night too.
Yeah, I know. Not good for. What day is it?
Tuesday. I know, it's been a long day. And it's like 100 degrees here. So I feel stinky and sweaty.
Me too. It's okay.
Okay. Questions. Make sure you unmute yourself, you guys, if you have questions, and open forum right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was all really good. I have a lot of like ideas.
Was really excited about this, like heart palpitation excited, but it's good. I've never done anything like this before, so this was really good. Good experience for me.
Do you guys have questions? She's just
I overwhelmed.
No, I think that you actually did such a good job that you like covered everything, so there's no room for questions.
You were fantastic. I really don't have any questions. My son is sitting here asking me, do you have any questions, Mom? But you covered you covered so much. And I'm so glad that you recorded this, Lisa, because I'm so bummed that some other people weren't on it that I know would benefit from this so much. It was a fantastic.
And I think what I might do, Sherry, it looks like you want to ask a question here in just a second, but I might urge you to maybe put some stuff in writing that we can maybe be posting in the group so that people can refer back in the tribe group.
I could even just make show notes. Yeah. Right. And just kind of put it all on paper. Yeah. I'd be happy to do that.
Okay. Question.
Actually, I don't have a question. So can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I went through a lot of what you are talking about. And I actually did go on a complete elimination diet. For like 5 years, I had hives and we couldn't figure out what was causing them. And I finally went to a functional medicine doctor who, discovered leaky gut, extremely high levels of bad bacteria, basically everything you said. Yeah. So much so that my pancreas enzymes were like non-existent. My thyroid my antibody thyroids were pretty high, but otherwise the rest of my thyroid was okay. But, so all these testings determined what it was. So I did, you've probably heard of her too, like Dr. Amy Myers, who's also, nice, that one? Okay. So I followed her, I followed this diet to come off of all of that, all of those anti-inflammatory, all of those inflammatory.
Yes.
So I followed an anti-inflammatory diet, basically, and problem solved. I am, for the last 7 months, no hives, no itchy, no random breaking out. I mean, it extended to my face. I'd have puffy face. And so it's amazing how bad all this stuff is for you.
Yeah.
I mean, a regular doctor, I went to see an allergist first. He just upped allergy medication and kept putting me on stronger prescriptions. And I'm like, but you're not fixing the problem, right?
It's not the cause. It's just the symptom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now I'm off gluten. So when we were at when I was at the convention just last month, you guys probably noticed that when we were eating, I'm like gluten-free, because but being off gluten completely completely has allowed me to, that was the biggest trigger for me.
Yeah.
So every once in a while, maybe a couple times a month, I can now have ice cream and do okay with it. You know, I'll take an enzyme with it,
Yeah.
but gluten was my biggest thing. We also have, I have my DNA test indicated I have a predisposition to celiac. So apparently if I didn't treat this then, I would have probably become a full-blown celiac. So yeah,
Well,
thank you for everything. I like how you put it so succinct. And I would like to, the show notes you mentioned, to be able to share this with other people, because I've never been able to get all my stuff.
And that kind of reminded me of one question that I'm not sure they have identified, but we've a little bit talked about it. But so if I were to do this or have my kids, you know, do these simple things, would I expect like quick results? Or what would be a realistic time frame for one to expect their gut to be restored?
What I've read is 6 months is kind of a good ballpark, because your immune system has memory. So in order to go through a process of not only getting the bad stuff out, you know, stopping the inflammatory foods, but also healing your gut. And there's some supplements and things that you can research and talk to a functional medicine doctor or somebody who is interested in healing the gut.
Right.
There are some things like aloe, glutamine, things that you can do for the bone broth is one thing too.
Yeah.
I try to put that into soups once a week, that help that glue of that lining that we were talking about, that fence, stick together better.
Okay.
And so there are some things that you can do. So you want to get the bad things out, you want to start healing, so that nothing goes in between that fence anymore. Because as I mentioned, even if it's just a little bit, your immune system is going to be attacking it for a while. So it's not going to be overnight.
Okay.
And that's the hard part of all this. If you don't have like any, you know, crippling symptoms, like if you're just, oh, I just feel like a foggy brain, or I'm tired. I mean, I'll be honest, it's hard to be like, oh, I'm going to quit gluten for 6 months.
Totally.
Like that just is not our lifestyle. It's not our way of thinking. And so I think it just really takes that, that determination and that decision that I'm going to try something, and I'm going to give it time.
And I think what I try to teach people in classes, because people can often feel overwhelmed with wanting to be like toxin free, which I don't love that term toxin free, because in our culture, you can't really be free of all toxins.
No.
But everything that you do avoid matters. It
Yeah.
matters, whether it's from avoiding, you know, because we used to do a lot of ibuprofen. And, you know, there's sometimes I do get headaches with my period where oils haven't, like, so maybe there's once a month where I'm taking it, but that's a heck of a lot better than like 4 times a
little
week.
ache and pain that you're like, I'm going to take some ibuprofen.
Right. Or like changing out like a toothpaste, or adding in the fish oil, whatever it may be.
And really, like you mentioned, I've 10 years. 10 years I've gotten to like what I'm doing now. That's a lot of baby steps, and it's a lot of going backwards.
But what I love, like,
and back,
I know.
forward.
But see, this is what I love, is like what you touched on earlier, is how teaching the younger generation. So whether or not you have kids, and someone said it really good one time about like in regards to essential oils, but I think it's the whole healthy living, that if you have kids, if you know kids, if you're ever in contact with kids, if you ever see a kid, this matters. Because you're teaching that forward to that generation. So what I particularly love is when my kids are absorbing, and they just know no different, that this is how they live, this is how they eat, this is how they clean their house.
Like my kids know that going out and playing in the dirt is good for their microbiome.
Yeah, totally.
They just know that.
Yeah.
So.
Right. I love that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have any more questions. If you don't, Jamaica said thank you. She had to pop off, but then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
And
we're over 30 minutes for sure. Sorry.
But that was so good. Like, no, you're fine. It was so good. I appreciated how well you made it digestible. Pun intended. Not really.
I agree. I took notes on what you were saying so that I could become more succinct in telling people what I went through too. You know, I'm like, you really, you know, you really made it easy to understand, and so I took notes while we were going. So,
Another,
thank you.
on each part of that.
I think so. Yeah.
But
More to come. More
Yeah.
to come.
that was hard putting all
You
of
did
that in like
I know.
my notes, but
But you
I'm glad
did.
it was helpful.
You did.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for coming on. I really appreciate